Hi students, in this video we're going to be going over adding and subtracting integers. Our essential question for these notes is, how is the sum and difference of integers calculated? So how is the sum and difference of integers calculated? So first, we're going to talk about absolute value because understanding absolute value is very important for being able to understand how to add and subtract integers. Now, absolute value of an integer is its distance from 0 on the number line. And the notation, where you see x and bars around it, is what is used for absolute value of an unknown integer that satisfies a given condition. So what's important to notice about this is that absolute value, again, is the distance from 0 on the number line, and that the bars around a number or a variable are what is used to signify that that is absolute value. So example number 1. If we were asked to find the absolute value of -3 and 3, how do those compare? So the best way to think about this is by looking at a number line. And if you remember before, we said that absolute value is the difference, or is basically the distance between the number and 0 on a number line. So if I look at -3, it is 1, 2, and 3 away from 0 on the number line. And in the same way, +3 is also 3 away from 0 on the number line, which basically tells us that the absolute value then of -3 would be 3, and the absolute value of +3 would still be a 3. So in either direction, what is that distance? And for both of them, it was 3. So a few examples, the absolute value of 4. Well, if we were to compare that on a number line, it means that it would be 4 away from 0. In the same way, -10 would be how many away from 0 on the number line? It would be a +10. So as you can notice, pretty much what this is doing is it's either keeping it a positive or it's making it into a positive. However, what happens if we have a negative outside the absolute value? Well, the absolute value of -3 would be 3. But since there's a negative outside the absolute value, then the answer in the end will actually be -3. And in the same way with number 4, the absolute value of 2 is just 2, but since that negative is outside the absolute value, that means our answer would be a -2. All right, you have a few practice problems right here. These are on the foldable that's going to be glued into the left side of your notebook. Take a few minutes, answer these questions, and make sure that you submit them on Edpuzzle in just a couple seconds. All right, so adding integers. How is the sum of integers calculated? So first, let's think about a number line. How could you solve -5 plus 3 on a number line? Well, the first thing you want to do is just put a dot above that very first integer, which is -5. And then ask yourself, are we going to be moving up 3, so towards the positives? Okay, or are we going to move down 3 towards the negatives? So over here is our positives, if we go this way, and this way would be our negatives. Well, obviously we're going to have to move to the right because it's a +3. And when we move up 1, 2, and 3, that gives us a -2. So what this means is that -5 plus 3 is a -2. Okay, so let's try another one. 6 plus -9. 6 plus -9. Okay, so put your dot right above the 6. And then are we going to move to the right 9 or to the left 9? Since it's a negative, we're going to end up moving to the left 9. So I count over 9, and that puts me all the way over here at -3. So what this tells us then is that 6 plus -9 is a -3. And one thing to note on this one and the last one is look at those look at the signs that are in front of both of those integers. Okay, so on this problem, are there more positives or are there more negatives? Well, since there are more negatives, we know that our answer will be a negative. Now there are some rules that you can use for adding integers if you do not want to draw a number line every time. So the rule is to add two integers that have the same sign. You have to add the absolute value of the integers and keep the same sign as the add-ins. So one thing I always say is if it has the same signs, you add and keep. So same signs, add and keep the signs. All right, so example, and I'm just going to leave the rules here on the left side. Really what this is saying is basically put these into absolute values. So add the absolute values, and the absolute value of both of these numbers is 12 and then 7. They both become positive. Well, what's 12 plus 7? That is 19. And then if you remember down here, it says that if you have the same signs, you need to add and keep. So same signs, you add and keep. So we added them together, and since they were both negatives, that means our final answer is going to be a negative 19. So that means our final answer is going to be a negative 19. All right. Okay, let's look at another one. 10 plus 4. So we take the absolute value of both of those, and 10 and 4 will just stay at 10 and 4. And then when you add those together, so we found the absolute value of the integers, you keep the same signs as the add-ins. So 10 plus 4 is 14. Since they were both positives, it's going to stay a positive, and 10 plus 4 is 14. Okay, let's try one with 3 integers. So one with 3 integers. So let's take the absolute value of all of these numbers. So the absolute value of negative 2, negative 3, and negative 4, they're all going to become positive. So 2 plus 3 plus 4. Okay, what's 2 plus 3 plus 4? That's going to be 9. Now ask yourself, okay, with the same signs, we added them together, and we have to keep the signs. All of these were a negative, so that means our answer in the end is going to be a negative. So negative 2 plus negative 3 plus negative 4 ends up being a negative 9. And I think this confuses people sometimes because they think about the multiplying and dividing integers rule, and they get that one confused. So make sure you follow the rules for adding integers, like the ones that are on the left. Okay, so I'm trying to give you guys a lot of examples, so that way when you go into your homework, you've got a lot of things to refer to. Now, what if we had one where it was adding integers with absolute value? Okay, adding integers with absolute value. Oops, I skipped ahead. Now, over the last few problems, I really broke it down to where we had to do, where you had to show the absolute value of the numbers when you added them together. But some of you guys are really good at adding integers, so if you can do this in your head and you can skip that step, that's fine. So if you ask yourself, negative 5 plus negative 3, what is that? Well, since they have the same signs, you have to add them together, which makes 8, and then you keep the sign, which makes a negative 8. So see, I kind of skipped some steps compared to the previous problems, but that's mostly because I think some of you guys may not need all those extra steps. Now ask yourself, what's the absolute value of negative 8? And that is just 8. So now we just kind of combined the idea of absolute value with adding integers. Now what do you do if you have adding integers with different signs? So if you have adding integers with different signs, and I actually have an error right here. So instead of add, that should be subtract. Subtract. Okay, so adding integers with different signs means that you subtract the absolute value of the integers and keep the same sign of the greater absolute value. So different signs subtract. So same signs add, different signs subtract. All right. So to add two integers with different signs, let's look at a few examples. So what if I had 6 plus negative 10? Now remember, it says different signs subtract. So if you think about what we do with absolute value, just take that higher number, put it at the front, and find the absolute value of both numbers. So what we end up with is 10 minus 6, which then is 4. However, it says you have to keep the sign of the greater absolute value. So are there more positives or are there more negatives? There are more negatives, so that means our answer then is going to be a negative. So our answer then will be a negative 4. A negative 4. Now, if you know how to do some of these steps in your head without showing the absolute value, that's completely fine. This is just to kind of give you a different perspective on how to solve these, but if you don't need to show the absolute value when you show your work for your homework, that's fine. All right, let's look at another one. Negative 4 plus 12. Since the signs are different, we subtract. So let's find the absolute value of both and subtract them. So the absolute value of 12 is 12, and the absolute value of negative 4 is 4. So when you do 12 minus 4, you get 8. Now, are there more negatives or are there more positives? In this problem, there's more positives, so we know that negative 4 plus 8 will be, or I'm sorry, negative 4 plus 12 will be positive 8. Will be a positive 8. All right, so let's look at a more difficult answer or problem. What if we had same signs and different signs? What if we had same signs and different signs? What you need to do is you need to make sure you start from the left and then move towards the right as you start solving these. So first, negative 3 plus negative 10. Ask yourself, are the signs the same? Since they are the same, remember, same signs you add and keep. So negative 3 plus negative 10 would be a negative 13 plus 8. And it's very important that you show the steps like this. Okay. Now, like I said before, you don't need to show all the absolute value part. If you already understand that, that's just to help some people that maybe didn't understand why we do what we do. All right, now negative 13 plus 8, are the signs the same? Since they are not the same, we subtract. So what's 13 minus 8? 13 minus 8 is 5. And are there more negatives or are there more positives? There are more negatives. So your answer is negative 5. Negative 5, and that's it. All right, example number 8. All right, so what if we had some with absolute value signs? Start in the very inside and then work your way to the right. So negative 6 plus 12, the signs are not the same, so you subtract. So what's 12 minus 6? That would be 6. And are there more positives or negatives? There are more positives, so we get a positive 6. Again, the signs are not the same, so we subtract. 10 minus 6 is 6. And are there more positives or negatives? There are more negatives. So we're left with negative 4. And then what's the absolute value of negative 4? Which would be just 4. Just 4. All right, here are a few practice problems for you to work through. Some of them look easy, some of them look a little bit more difficult. Make sure you take some time, answer those on your foldable, and then input them into Edpuzzle. All right, last part, subtracting integers. How is the difference of integers calculated? How is the difference of integers calculated? All right, so the rules of subtracting integers. To subtract two integers, you add the opposite, and then you follow the addition rules. So add the opposite and follow the addition rules. So all those rules that we did earlier, once you change the subtraction to adding, you just follow those rules. All right, so what if we had negative 12 minus a negative 5? Now, what does add the opposite mean? Okay, what does add the opposite mean? Basically, all this is saying is that your sign right here, your subtraction sign, is going to change to addition, and that second number is going to become the opposite. So when this changes to from subtraction, it changes to addition, and the opposite of negative 5 would be a positive 5. Now we have a very simple problem because it's back to adding. And so all you have to ask yourself is, okay, what is the, if there are different signs, I have to subtract. So 12 minus 5 is 7. And are there more positives or are there more negatives? There are more negatives, so our answer is negative 7. Negative 7. So as you can see, it's actually pretty easy. There's just one more step compared to adding integers, and that is just to add the opposite. All right, example number 10. So this time, and this one, a lot of people make a mistake on this, and they'll go, oh, 3 minus 12, that's 9. However, you need to slow down and make sure that you add the opposite to see if it's correct. So we are going to change this subtraction to a addition sign, and this positive 12 to a negative 12. So now we have 3 plus, see how the subtraction sign is now addition, a negative 12, see how it was a positive 12 and it turned into a negative 12. Now since the signs are different, we subtract. 12 minus 3 is 9. However, are there more positives or more negatives? There are more negatives, so our answer is a negative 9. Negative 9. All right, let's look at another example, just something that's a little bit more difficult. Okay, what if we had a mix of addition and subtraction problems? Now what you have to do is just start from the left and then work your way towards the right. So first, negative 4 plus 5. With addition, we just go straight into those rules. Are the signs the same or are they different? Since they're different, we know we subtract, and 5 minus 4 is 1. Are there more negatives or are there more positives? There are more positives, so our answer is a positive 1. All right, now we have subtraction. And what we have to make sure we do is we have to add the opposite. So this subtraction becomes addition, and this negative 6 becomes a positive 6. Okay? So this became addition, and this became the opposite. Now simply, everyone knows what 1 plus 6 is. That would just be 7. Okay? And even though you think this might look very simple, a lot of people make a very common mistake and are subtracting very incorrectly. So make sure that you add the opposite. So this subtraction becomes addition, and the positive 10 becomes a negative 10. And then when we add those together, we get negative 3. And the absolute value of negative 3 would be 3. So that's it. Okay. So you have some more practice problems that are on your foldable, this time for subtracting integers. So take a few minutes, solve those problems, and then you are done. If you have any questions, let me know.